heavy tank. The most famous, well known, and beloved design in world history. The idea of the heavy tank remains in the public consciousness as a modern and powerful concept. But what if I were to tell you the heavy tank concept sort of never worked?
Heresy! 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 Come on, baby, give me some heresy! For she's heresy!
Now, I know many of you guys are going to be quite critical of that, but please allow me to explain. The idea of the heavy tank is a tank with big armor, massive gun, large size. It basically means the best tank physically possible. The heavy tank has been seen in a large amount of variations from almost every nation. The IS series, the KV series, the Tiger series, multi-turreted tanks, and American heavy tanks are just some forms of heavy tanks that exist. The first series of the first tank that I could say we could call conclusively a heavy tank is the Shard 2C. Although this is controversial, after all, some people refer to the original Mark I as a heavy tank, but I digress. The Shard 2C is mounted with a 75mm or 155. I've seen various different guns mounted to the Shard 2C. Main gun and a machine gun mounted in the rear turret, as well as two on the sides in sponsons. The idea continued to evolve into the A1E1 independent heavy tank, which became the blueprint for all future multi-turreted tanks, except for a few. The heavy tank concept continued to evolve into arguably one of the most famous heavy tanks ever to exist. The Tiger 1. Almost everyone knows this tank. It's the most famous tank in World War II, arguably. A tank which is so good, yet so bad at the same time. Later on developed into my favorite tank of all time, the M26 Pershing. I understand the M26 was not the best tank, but I like it. Around this time, the IS series of tanks were also developed. Would be the last remaining heavy tanks to continue to see service, except, no wait, that was the T series. I don't know, the T10, M. Heavy tanks would slowly be retired as the main battle tank came onto the scene. Starting with the Centurion tank and the M48, main battle tanks took the world by storm. Eventually, they were carrying better guns, better armor, moved faster than even the best heavy tanks. Now, the history of the heavy tank out of the way, allow me to get on with the concept and why it's flawed. Now, let me just craft a quick example here. Let's just say you're a commander of an army. Doesn't matter where, doesn't matter when, let's just go with it. You're launching a three-pronged attack. Now, two of your forces, they're just decoys. They're meant to distract the enemy. Might make some minor breakthroughs, but they don't matter. They bog the enemy down. However, one of your forces, that's your primary spearhead. Now, that's got your best commander, your heaviest tanks armed with your best troops, and now you've just told your enemy exactly where to concentrate their firepower. I mean, yeah, your forces on the sides may have broken through, made some minor gains, but at the cost of all your best and most expensive units. Now, the heavy tank concept falls apart when you realize that you spend a lot of the time, money, and expertise producing a vehicle that does little more than sit down and absorb hits. Constantly blowing up and breaking down. Unable to be used. The heavy tank concept was, and still is, nothing more than a high-priced punching bag. The heavy tank, however, has validation in a world where tanks only fight other tanks. You see, when the average armchair historian, or TV blogger or average nerd, looks at their favorite tank designs, they often don't take into consideration things like aircraft, or artillery, or most importantly, infantry. The heavy tank's primary weakness tended not to be other tanks, but two guys on a rocket launcher. Or in some cases, two teenagers and a wooden log, Russia. Now, the failures of the heavy tank aren't anything unique to the heavy tank. Tank destroyers and self-propelled guns also find themselves vulnerable to infantry assaults at close range. However, what makes them different from heavy tanks is that SPGs and tank destroyers are not supposed to be getting up close. They're supposed to be popping the enemy from far away. I mean, why would you get so close when your armor is paper thin? Tank destroyers tended to be lightly armored. There were a few exceptions, but that was generally the concept. You use your heavy tanks, the enemy is basically free to dictate how it's deployed. Let's be honest, if you're being attacked from three sides, you see Panzer IVs on two sides and a Tiger tank in the middle, which one are you going to concentrate your fire on? Don't answer that question, it's rhetorical. That's right, the Tiger tank. And let's be honest, heavy tanks are strong, but they're not immune to anti-tank guns. Nothing is. And when that tank gets destroyed, you gotta spend days and a lot of resources trying to repair it. Because, and let me say this, nothing damaged can't be fixed. However, there's a certain things that the cost of repairing it is too much to justify fixing it over just making something new. Overall, you end up spending a lot of money, resources, time repairing and making spare parts for a vehicle that does little more than sit down and get shot at. Yes, heavy tanks can be a mighty and dominant force during battles. As an example, during Operation Barbarossa, where Soviet KV-1s took out legions of German tanks. Or in one case of a French city whose name I'm not even going to attempt, a single French B-1 BIS heavy tank, which you guys are all probably familiar with, took out 30 German Panzer IIIs and IVs during the Battle of Tank Alley. Or during one Villers Bocage story, where a Tiger tank took out dozens of Shermans and nearly wiped out an entire Allied assault force by itself. It also took out a bunch of Cromwells and Fireflies, but that doesn't matter. In the vast majority of cases, a medium tank did the job of a heavy tank without the flaws of a heavy tank, which is why heavy tanks fell out of favor in exchange for main battle tanks. But that's all I got for now. If you take anything from it's that heavy tanks are big, heavy, slow, and vulnerable. But don't take this as I hate heavy tanks. In fact, heavy tanks are some of my favorite vehicles. But yeah, I accept that they aren't a valid solution, or never really were. They worked, sure. I mean, they were cool. They're interesting to look at, but they're not practical. I'm not going to be driving a Tiger tank into Afghanistan anytime soon. Wait, no, the Afghanistan war ended. Ukraine. Yeah. I'm not driving a Tiger tank into Ukraine. But granted, how Russia is performing, I could probably do that and actually somehow become a tank ace, knowing me. Anyways, all right. I'm headed to bed. Nighty.